All right, guys, it's Greg. Been lucky enough to have Ryan back with us. Tonight's discussion will be covering EDC. I've been getting a lot of questions on EDC and how we carry, and we're going to go over briefly on how we carried or how I carried overseas versus how I carry here in the States. So, Ryan, start us off, brother.
But I guess, the biggest thing we run into, if we're going to take it step by step here, is, carry location. So, mostly two options. It's either in the waistband or on the waistband. And then obviously that varies as far as like the clock method being 12 o'clock is the front. So I personally now in my off-duty time use appendix in the waistband. It's just, for me personally, I can reach it at any point, like in a car. It's easy enough to get to. It conceals the best for me. It's the most comfortable. I don't necessarily wear it exactly at 12. It's to the right. So you would say like 1 o'clock-ish. And then we can get into like holsters and setups like that. 3 o'clock in the waistband doesn't feel super comfortable for me. And to be honest, if you're doing 3 o'clock on the waistband, that's kind of hard to conceal. Like you might think you are, but really not really. It looks like you have a giant gun and you have a shirt over it. And then,
I'm going to add to that. I do the same thing. I've been appendix carrying since 2007, right? And that's back when it was FUBA, and everyone's like, "You're going to shoot your junk off, so you can't do that." And then there's instructors here in the States that would not allow you to appendix carry, taking a class. Even to this day, I run 1 o'clock to 1:30 time frame. And on the clock method, I don't like the 12 o'clock because it's up front. So if I'm on the ground, or I know a lot of instructors teach it because they say, hey, that's, where the center of your body is. Well, again, I'm calling BS. If you train with it, you've got to be comfortable with it. A lot of them are setting up at the 12 o'clock just because it looks good. But I mean, if they like it, more power to them.
It's still also, I think really when people say center line, I think that's more along the thought process of like, if you have a knife or something mounted there, is that both hands can get to it, kind of like tourniquet placement on a plate carrier. So look, if it's a couple 4 inches over to the right, my left hand can still reach it. But if I'm doing, small of the back or 4 o'clock, that's going to be tough for a left-hand draw if I'm right-handed. So that I feel like that meets with the concept for as far as that's concerned. Small of the back, I never really was a fan. I've tried it at 4 o'clock in the waistband, and everything seems great. Kind of rough in the car sometimes, but as soon as you bend over, that thing's flagging straight up. It's not like folding over with your back. So, and again, appendix is tough. You're going to have a lot of options for holsters, and then some guys absolutely cannot stand it. And I think if they get the exact holster that fits them personally, they're like, oh, well, never mind. Like now I'm into it. So, and again, that's just tough to try and, find your buddy, see who has what. Nobody wants to spend hundreds of dollars on holsters to only use them.
Like me?
Yeah. Which is, everybody's kind of
Foot Locker full.
Yeah. And then I'd say like the next part of that would be, are we talking Kydex or leather? For me, it's Kydex. I try and get the thickest I can. I haven't had any break yet. I have broke Kydex loops, but that was after several years overseas, and I was doing some pretty heavy stuff. So actually at work, in my bag, I would carry like a spare. Leather, I guess it feels more comfortable. I'm not really a super big fan of it. The big issue with that is a lot of times the mouth of the holster kind of collapses on itself when the weapon's not in it. So when you're trying to reholster, it can get a little tricky. It can get a little unsafe. And to be honest, they're usually a lot more expensive, and there's like a long waiting list. So I guess if somebody had one for me, but again, it's hard to accommodate a light and a red dot with a leather style holster.
Right. Now I've run both of them. Majority of the leather I would run around at 3 o'clock just because they fit tighter. But I would carry. I never, like you said, I could train with it, but it's slower to get back in. So my thought process is once I drew the weapon, then I could take my time to put it back in the holster.
That's another issue. Yeah, with a lot of leather holsters, they have leather loops. If I was carrying a leather holster, I'd want an appendix, and I'd want the discrete concept carry clips, the DCC clips. Specifically, they actually hold way tighter. They never come loose. It's pretty hard to get them off. And then the other biggest thing I like about Kydex is that it has like an active retention. So if I can set the retention on it by adjusting a tension screw on the holster, which some don't have with Kydex, so I don't buy those. So now I can decide how hard I want to pull for this thing to fall out. Shake it upside down, roll around, or whatever I'm worried about. A lot of times with leather, you're kind of stuck with where you're at, or you got to do the old put the weapon, in a plastic bag, jam it in the holster, let it kind of set up. Again, it's preference, but it would be something that I would tell guys, like, if you're carrying one with it, they're really, these are just things to consider. So there'd be like must-haves, nice-to-haves, and then like it doesn't really matter. And I'd say retention is a must, a carry location that's comfortable, because otherwise you're not going to do it. And then, to be honest, especially nowadays, you got to be able to conceal this. A lot of people aren't super big fans of it. You don't want to cause a ruckus if it's not carried correctly. And you also don't want to cause problems. Like I've seen guys like overseas with our job that start getting like pinched nerves from the carry location, because it's, you're doing like 20 hours a day with this thing. So it's excessive, but again, if you're going to be carrying this gun, why not make it as comfortable as possible?
Well, that's one of the other reasons. Again, I'm appendix carry, and especially stateside and overseas. But what I've noticed is, again, it's one of those, it's taboo for someone to look at a man's groin. I mean, no matter what. So it's easier for us, even overseas, we could get into venues with appendix compared to wearing a Batman belt or something at 3 o'clock as well.
Yeah, that's actually true. Yeah, nobody really wanted to be grabbing around there. They just pat your sides or maybe the small of your back, and then
or they just do the airport and run it straight down and be good with it.
Yeah, and looking at somebody straight on, sometimes appendix carrying, if you're doing it correctly, the right gun, X amount of other factors that we'll get into, it's not as noticeable. I mean, again, these are all opinions, but
it's our personal opinion.
Yeah, having the retention.
But the same thing with appendix, though, and that's what I tell students and anyone else. If you stand up straight like you normally stand and let your arms hang down to your side, where they come in contact with your body, it's not going to be at your 3 and 9 o'clock. It's not, that's unnatural. But it's going to be about the 1:30, 2 o'clock. So your hand is already there at the weapon. So it's less movement, which means more speed. That's
true. Yeah. Let's say we kind of touched on it, the belt loops versus DCC clips versus like the single plastic clip. The plastic ones I try and stay away from, even if they're Kydex. They do have a habit of breaking over time. The DCC clips are my favorite. Just a note, I run a 1.5-inch belt because it fits on everything. So I don't run 1.5 DCC clips. I run 1.75, because if you have a 1.5,
same here.
You're going to have to fight to get that on. So just another
and it's
thing.
easier. Again, it's easier for me to adjust if I'm going to sit down with that one at 1.75. I can actually move it around slightly versus fight with it. But same here.
There's also different lengths. So the longer the clip, the deeper it will put the holster. Some holsters have multiple mounting points so that you can raise that adjustment as you choose. Others have more of a slotted system. So I would just make sure that you're aware of that. If you have a claw in your holster, make sure that, pushes the rear of the gun, like the butt of the gun, more in towards you, that's in line with the holster mounting point for the DCC block. Otherwise it will get kind of wonky on you. And then, they're like $5-6 maybe for a DCC clip. I can't remember the exact height of mine right now. I want to say it's like the 4.25 or something crazy like that. I don't remember.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. And that's the other thing, again, doing a lot of concealed carry classes, is a lot of students don't know the exact. They try to carry because they're carrying inside their waist. They're trying to set their pistol or their grip basically right on their belt, so they can't obtain a perfect grip because it's sitting too low. And
Good
then
point.
What I've noticed is if you get it too high, which is going to be extremely fast, but yet you can't conceal it as much either. So you got to find a happy medium with your body type.
Yeah, it's true. If it is too high, it's going to start falling forward.
Right.
And then you're going to have to start putting all sorts of attachments to push it back. I do like the claws or whatever we're calling them. It does help. It will push it back in as far as the grip of the pistol closer to your body, so it'll have less printing if that's an issue. Yeah, I'd say, DCC clips, get a claw. One thing I'll point out, it seems like common sense, but you'd be surprised. Whenever you do get a Kydex holster, set it to where you want it, feel how it fits in your gun. Okay, great. Take all of those screws out and then put them all back in with Loctite, and you still have a couple minutes to readjust to your preference, because they aren't Loctited. Even though a lot of them have locking mechanisms on them, as far as like for the screw and a lock nut, they will come apart, and it's going to be at the most annoying point ever. So definitely take it all apart and Loctite it. And a lot of these holster companies will actually even send you a small vial of it, whether it be blue or red. And I would just say, definitely. I've forgotten to do that before. So
that's not. You lose screws.
Yes, and this happens, and it always happens like out in the middle of nowhere in the woods. It's never like conveniently sitting in a car and like, oh, there it is. So.
Well, another thing I do, especially downrange, I carry an appendix, which, again, I came in early with it.
Yeah.
But it's, especially if we're in the vehicle or whatever we're doing all day, but I would put a pad in there. But what I would get was the Dr. Scholl's, the gel cups, and you can get them overseas as well. And I take Velcro and put on one side, but I had that gel barrier there at the end of my muzzle, so it protected me. It's comfortable, and it actually helped with the ride as well.
Yeah, I see people doing that now. It's called like a pillow attachment, depending on there's a lot of companies that offer it. There's a neoprene wedge. So, anything, I would just say make sure it doesn't it's not porous, because that thing's going to smell after a while.
Yeah, that's why the gel was real nice.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the next one that always comes up is, and we kind of briefly touched on it, is having an empty chamber versus a round chamber. Yeah. And again, I would just say, look, I want that gun ready to go when I draw it. Maybe I can't do it with two hands. There's a million scenarios where I won't be able to do it with two hands. So unfortunately, if there isn't a round in the chamber, I now need both hands to draw this weapon. Not only that, sometimes in the heat of the moment, it might not be the smoothest sliding the actual slide to the rear in order to chamber around, and now you've caused a malfunction. I guess some people's thought processes, they think they won't have an ND like that, but I guess I would point out, and we should have talked about this before, in a Kydex or leather holster, make sure it completely encompasses your whole trigger guard. There should be nothing that could sneak in there, right? And that goes for any type of holster, all the waistband or in. So I don't see how it could fire by itself. Honestly, most people, when they have NDs, I'd argue like 98% of them are when somebody is manipulating the weapon, whether they're unloading it or loading it, right? That's usually when that occurs. So if it's in your holster, I would say that's almost a nil as far as my opinion. So I would strongly recommend people do not carry it with an empty chamber.
Well, the same thing is one of those when I reholster, for instance, right?
Yeah.
I've always leaned backwards, right? So
Yeah.
you can actually push it in, so you're not trying to fight with your stomach or anything else. So it's just little things like that as well.
Yeah, take your time, and if it's not on the range, you take the whole holster out. Put the weapon out, put the weapon in, put it in, whatever you want to do. Just take your time for sure.
Yes, that's the key. Is you want to get it out fast because you're drawing for a reason, right?
Yeah.
But you got all the time in the world to reholster.
Yeah, and you can get fabric. We've seen guys with the old fleece pullers with the toggles on a waistband holster outside, it getting hung up during a reholster and firing off. Weird stuff like that happens, and that's what it is. You're not, again, it's a admin environment that we're reholstering more than likely on a range, and if in real life, we're going to put it away when we feel we need to. But we have all the time in the world, like you said. Let's double check. Let's make sure nothing's get hung up. It's not fire 2 rounds and and done, right? So it's just I feel like that's just common sense with everything. But
well, it is, and that's the other thing that we could go ahead and jump ahead of ourselves slightly. But it's one of those. Say a scenario, right? And you've got your EDC. Yeah. You have to draw your weapon for whatever reason, and then the cops are called. So it's one of those, you want to be able to reholster it safely, but you don't want to, if there's a shooting, you don't want to have your weapon because they don't know who you are, right? Yep. So you want to try to get it reholstered efficiently, but in a safe manner, so they don't think you're a bad guy when they arrive.
Yeah, it's true. And then really, hey, last ditch effort. Maybe you weren't paying attention and one shows up, just throw it on the ground. We don't, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
You might have it in your hand. Yeah. So
we can worry about that later. Hey, I'm a good guy.
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's already happened, unfortunately. But
yes.
Yeah. Next would be a weapon mounted light versus like a pocket carry type light. I've heard it, both guys might want to say, hey, I agree that we need a weapon light or at least light at night. So I don't carry one on my weapon. I put one in my pocket. Some people do both.
Right.
Man, I kind of do. I got these like cheap $3 little pen lights that are in my pocket that,